for the last, from 2000 and really on up, they've really become more and more commonplace with installation. But we're seeing a big trend lately in installations that a lot of remodelers are going back and they're selling against insert installations. And it can be a kind of a slippery slope when you do that, but really you tend to have a better outcome with your customer, and they understand what they're getting. A lot of customers, when you say, hey, I'm going to put in new windows, and you talk to them, we understand that inserted full frame, but not a lot of people tell the homeowners that. They just say, hey, you're getting new windows, and they don't tell them how they're going to install them, and they're going to do an insert installation. But if you go through the customer and say, hey, look, I can install this as an insert, the window's going to cost about the same if I install it as an insert or I install it as a full frame window. So you can explain to them and say, hey, look, we can install this insert window and it's X amount of dollars, but we don't really know what's behind your window. We don't know if there's any insulation behind it. We don't know how it's flashed to the outside. A lot of times there's no flashing. So when we do a full tear out, we can say, look, we're going to take all that old window out, we're going to take all those old potential problems out, we're going to start with just the rough framing, and we're going to properly install a new window. Some of the replacement companies, like I said, started that trend, and they're really finding that that's pushing, that the customers, it costs more to do that full frame, but the customers really understand that value. And that's another way, when you explain that to them, it's another way that you increase your comfort level with windows and with the customer that way. So insert windows are still, though, if you say a replacement, I'd say they're still about 70% of the replacement market. So you can see how an insert window goes, and an insert window, quite honestly, they have a lot of bang for the buck. You can come in 45 minutes, or less, you can install a window, and you can turn a house around, and if it's the right house for it, it can work out really well. And when I say the right house for it, it's another level that I look at when I do a house. Is not only do I say, okay, I look at the existing windows, get an idea, I ask what their plan is with the house, but I really take a look. And if it's an older home with double hung windows, I know that there's going to be weight pockets behind there, big openings where the counterbalance weights were. And I know that those rough openings are a little bigger behind there. So if you do a full frame window, I know that they can fill in those little weight pockets, but I know that there's a little more framing to do. But I might suggest to those people, hey, look, you know, they can really take this 1800s house and pull up this whole window and make it really tight. On the converse, though, you go into a lot of houses from the 60s and 70s, a lot of ranch houses, big overhangs from those mid-century modern homes, and I see these double-hung windows and casement windows, and I say, they look pretty darn good. They're installed modern, they don't have weight pockets, they've had the big overhangs, so they've been protecting the window frames from rot and weather. People have maintained or painted them, and a lot of times I'll say, hey, it's a great candidate for inserts. So it's another level of determining what is best for that project. Any questions so far? Anyone? Okay. So going through when you make a determination and help lead a customer on to making those choices and doing it, you want to, like I talked about, you want to really make sure that the installation you do and all the parts and pieces of that installation you do make sure that you have no callbacks or no problems. And I was just talking with some guys earlier about remodeling, and when we have this nice new construction wall here for my little demo wall, it's really nice. I've got a nail fin, I can put on some window flashing tape, and I can flash that thing really nice and it looks great. But when I have a house that's existing, and I have a brick siding on there and brick mold up to it, and I tear that old window out, it's almost impossible to flash. And if you look at window and door manufacturers, if you look at Sierra Pacific, if you look at Marvin, which we sell, if you look at Installation Masters. Does anybody know what Installation Masters is? Are you familiar with Installation Masters? I gotta get you guys more familiar with Installation Masters. Installation Masters is a third-party company. It has some help from the window industry, also from a couple other industry partners, but it is a third-party accreditation and education company on just window installation. And you can become an installation master after you do their course, and they hold courses nationally and they are available if you search Installation Masters. But they are a really good source. They're not, like I said, they're not brand specific. And they really just tell you the best practices to date. And I say the best practices to date because I see a lot of not so fresh faces in here like myself, and we've seen a lot of things change. And boy, what I would have said 20 years ago has changed now. So they're always updating. But those installation masters and all the window and door manufacturers, they'll give you a nice, really good scenario for installing a window in a new construction wall, flashing and everything, or in a remodeling if you're residing the whole house. But a lot of us don't have that. And if you look at all these companies, they don't give you an option. They don't give you any information on how to install in an existing opening. And are there any attorneys in the house? Part of the reason is I think it's lawyers, and I think it's liability. Customers or window manufacturers are really afraid of being sued. And for that reason is why window and door manufacturers go to such a big extent on teaching installation. So if we teach you the right, proper ways to install the windows, there's a less likely chance that problems are going to happen later, whether they're the fault of the window companies or the fault of the installer. A lot of times the attorneys go to the biggest pockets and the window manufacturers are it. So they use this to help reduce their liability, but on the converse, they don't give us any really insight on how to install a proper window in a retrofit because of, again, liability. I think everything's different and they don't want to tell us something and we treat it as gospel and it doesn't work. So when you go in, and a lot of people, unfortunately, sealant is kind of your best friend. And a lot of people, well, I can caulk the windows in and it should be good, you know, and swallow hard. And was everybody here for the keynote this morning? And they said, what do you hope in a 1 year for that warranty period? You look at the phone and you hope it doesn't ring. You hope they don't call, right? And oh, come on, you know. We don't want that issue. We don't want to have other problems. We don't want to have leaking liability, things like that. So some of the things I'll go over today on installation are really a couple of simple things that I see that 90% of the people don't do in the field, but are really simple. And one of the things is, I got my tube of caulk here. As you can see, I've got a tube of sealant here in my caulk gun. It's by Sharpie. But pretend this is caulk. And if you have a rough opening, even if it's a retrofit, you've got brick up tight, but you've got a window you're putting in with a nail fin, take your bead of caulk and go around the entire rough opening with a continuous bead of caulk before you install your window and put it in the rough opening. And again, I skipped a step. This is after you'd put in your sill pan, but I'll go back to that. Really what you want is that sealant back on the sheathing when you put in your window and you've got the nailing fin, and it can be a rigid or a vinyl nailing fin. That is going to be your first line of sealant. When you put the window in, there's going to be sealant behind the nail fin. And I didn't test my rough opening before I got here, so there it works. So your window is going to have sealant behind the nail fin. It's going to have one barrier. And then you can obviously, you shim and you level and you put it in there. So that is one first step that I recommend that a lot of people, and even if it's inexpensive painter's caulk, a lot of people, it doesn't have to be polyurethane. I recommend a higher end polyurethane sealant.
I've always been taught you don't seal the bottom plane.
That's true. So That is true. So
I think there's some manufacturers that don't like the water.
So you don't want to trap in water, and that is a great question. So when I talked about pan, does anybody use sill pan? Any sill flashing? It's really important, and this is a liability thing. Windows leak. Windows can leak water. When they leak water, the water goes through the window, and you don't have a failing window, you have a failing wall because it's a water leak. And that's one thing. Let me go back to that customer expectation thing. When people say, hey, I've got 100-year-old windows and they operate fine, but I've got these vinyl windows and they're okay, but my house is 8 years old. One of the things to let your customers know, a lot of times when a vinyl window fails, it's not necessarily the glass failing or anything else, it's the frame failing, and that joint in the corner breaks, and it leaks water into your wall. So when water leaks into the wall, it's not good, it creates a big problem, and it creates a whole nother issue. So sill panning is a great thing to have, a sill flashing. Some of my customers take it to a next level. They'll increase all their rough openings by a ½ inch in height. And Josh over at Blifford Lumber really likes this because they'll put a piece of, on a 2x4 wall, they'll put a piece of 1/2x4 or 2x6 wall, 1/2x6 cedar bevel siding across that entire sill panning out. And then they'll put their sill flashing on top of this, their sill flashing that wraps down on top of that. So if any water actually gets through that window, and if it gets through here, it's a 50-50 chance. It's not going to go into the stud, but hopefully it rolls off before it rolls in and goes towards your drywall. But if you put that sill pan on there and that little bevel, well, it's going to run off. And what they do then is cut some little blocks and put it the opposite way that they sit on top of there to shim your window up. There's little details like that